All right. I'm setting this up to get ready for our 5 o'clock Mountain Time, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific Time live chat. I'm going to go ahead and set this up to go over to my timeline on Facebook so folks can pop in and watch there as well. And this will be a chat in which Len Pimentel, the creator of Prowlers Paragons Ultimate Edition, and myself are going to be talking about style and substance, cause and effect, and how to do all the things in Prowlers Paragons. There's been a lot of interesting questions that people have had about this. And I wanted to just cover, how would you do this? How would you do that kind of thing. So let me get this posted up on Facebook, and we'll be, as I said, officially chit-chatting here in another couple minutes. I'm just prepping stuff, putting in titles, and making that go live over there. I'm just prepping stuff. Okey-doke. So I'm just checking out something, a new comment that just got posted on the thing. I did, Len. I just sent it to you. So hopefully you will see it in your thingy. Meanwhile, Ricky Two Tails says, "Wow, the old gang is getting together around this cool new game. I was one of the thugs at Doug's when we gathered at the home of L. Douglas Garrett, Bruce Harlick, and friends on any Sunday afternoon. I was directed to the Kickstarter site by Ray Greer at our current RPG afternoon game and signed on. I hope this thing funds. I have a character rewriting itself after watching the Tech Trouble game session and downloading the Quickstart guide. I can hardly wait for the PDF to come out so I can see what develops from the rules. Exposing the results to a Steve Goodman economizer TM should be fun and prove insightful." As a boon, I would like permission to use the P&PUE shield with my background number overlaid during gameplay. I want to say absolutely use that shield anywhere. Thanks. Okay. That was a cool. I hear that's a Len. There's a Len. I see a Len.
Hello, hello.
Hola, and I'm supposed to say, I love you, my favorite Cubano from. So, she told me to tell you that. But yeah, another one of the originals from the Hero Games /Champions crew just posted a comment on.
Yep, saw that. That was awesome.
One of our things. So yeah, that's nice. That's very nice. King Zombie, by the way, is a guy named Sean Beatty. You've seen him on a few of the live demos.
Yep.
He's played Vigilant, where he has viciously abused the preparation rules. But I think people are starting to really wondering, where in the hell am I finding all these hats? I literally own every single one of them. For some people, it's shoes. For me, it's hats.
Speaking of hats, since we haven't really gotten rolling yet, you'll notice the one I'm wearing right now. So anyone who's watching the video or whatnot, just keep in mind this is Autism Awareness Month.
I'm currently typing a response to somebody over on the Facebook side. I'm trying to get them to come over here to the Kickstarter.
So they can type, so we can read their questions.
Yeah, we've got a number of people on. Yes, Autism Speaks, absolutely. I'm really, really proud to have you supporting that. Use creatively. Yes, well, you've definitely, much as that, as a paraphrase from the line in Boondock Saints, certainly shows the versatility of the word. In this case, the word preparation. But like I said, I'm going to try to keep an eye on what's going on with the Facebook simulcast, but
sure.
I'm trying to make sure everybody realizes that they should be over here on the Kickstarter side.
Well, that way we can see their questions. It's easier for us to see any questions that they might have.
Exactamundo.
There's also, I think, a little delay between what appears on the Kickstarter page and what appears on Facebook, if I remember.
Yes, there is. So, anyway, so the idea I had for this, because there have been a lot of questions, both in the Kickstarter comments, comments of all the different updates, as well as the main comment section, and on the Prowlers Paragons Ultimate Edition Facebook page, on the P&PUE Omniverse page, which I'm really excited about. That community is exploding. People are getting very excited over there. And various other places, people are asking a lot of really interesting questions about, how would you do this? How would you do that? How would you do another thing? And it all comes down to that style versus substance question, or that cause and effect question. And so I thought it'd just be really fun for you and I to.
Reminds me of conversations with Michael.
Exactly. Right. So I thought we should get into the fact that with almost any question a player is going to have about how to do something, I really have to go back and say, okay, so what you need to do is tell me what is the end result? This is what I finally figured out, is what do you actually want to have happen, right? Because they'll ask, well, can I do a thing where this happens and then this happens, like so that I could blow them through the wall? Well, all right. So what ultimately do you want to have happen because you blow them through the wall? Is it because it's really to look awesome as you do crap tons of damage to them? Or are you actually trying to cause something to happen because they got blown through a wall? What is it you actually want on the end of this? And then we can work backwards from that to make the best decision about what attack to use. So, for example, no, I just really want to do damage, but I just think it'd be cool if they went through the wall. Well, unless there's precious something behind that wall that it would be a significant narrative consequence for them to go through the wall, it's just an attack doing damage. If it is, in fact, something like if they go through that wall, they're going to fall out of a building and fall 60 feet, or they're going to go through the wall and blow up an important piece of equipment, and the players know that, then the knockback attack would be the necessary thing there, because that's a consequence that has to be part of the challenge. If, in fact, what they really want is, well, I just really want to knock them to the wall so they'll get all tangled up so that it's easier for somebody else to hurt them, that's a strategic attack designed to maybe throw some, pull some dice off of them so somebody else can come and pop them. So there's 3 different ways right off the top of my head to resolve the through the wall thing. And it all comes down to what did the player want as a result of their action. So I thought that was all right. We have questions lined up, so let's go ahead and pull the first one out. Philip Davis asks, I have a player who wants to absorb damage and diseases from victims and transfer the damage/disease to others in retribution for their acts. Suggestions on the least loudly way to do this? Appropriate insurance made by submitter. Some of that's hard for me. That's an interesting phrasing. There's
first one's easy, right?
Yeah, the first one's easy. That's energy absorption.
No. The absorb. Wait, could you pop that question up again?
There we go.
Absorb damage and diseases from victims. I don't think he's talking about it, or she, Philip. Let's assume Philip's he is talking about absorbing damage, as in absorbing blasts. I think, and I may be mistaken, but it sounds, if there's a little bit of a language barrier we're working with here, I'm not sure. But maybe what we're talking about is absorbing injuries, because it sounds like a healing thing, like absorb wounds and diseases from one person, and then transfer those to someone else.
Yes.
So absorbing the healing in the wounds would basically just be the healing power. Okay.
Yep. Which also means the diseases.
And you could also, whether or not that affects diseases, originally we had that as a pro, and then at the end of the day, it just struck me, if you want to let it happen, by all means, and if you don't. It's so campaign specific. It doesn't seem to make sense to pay extra points for that. So at least not in the general superhero game. So in terms of the absorption part, it would be healing. Then in terms of the infliction, well, the infliction part, inflicting pure damage for damage's sake, that might be death touch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then inflicting other diseases, well, that would just depend on the disease inflicted. So that could be like drain, like the drain power, or it could be the stun power.
I would want to keep it simple. That's just me. I would say if you want to be non-lethal, then you have a stun power that is dependent on when you drain something out of somebody. And if you really want it to be a nasty disease or horrific damage, then you take the death touch power, and you have both of those with a limitation that it's dependent on you actually healing somebody first.
Yeah, exactly.
So that sounds like the right way to go there. Then we've got Sean Beatty, aka King Zombie, who was asked about playing Alabama Slammer and super sped up and messed with Phalanx's gun. Is that more of a narrative rather than a VS roll-off? I'm not versus roll. Well, I mean, no, it's a real thing, because if item is a con, right? And there's also a variant con, which is basically if you have blast with the weapons con. Either way, though, it's a con, so it means that stuff is vulnerable to being messed with. And because of that, yes, it would be a roll-off, which I think we kind of did. There's a number of different ways you wanted that you were trying to do things with her to mess with Phalanx's core entity, by the way, not his summoned minions. So the strategic attack approach seemed like the way to go, but I decided to reinterpret the strategic attack. Well, not reinterpret. There's an option on strategic attack that says you can actually cause them to drop an item. But again, it's just what we were saying at the beginning, at the top of the thing, is at the end of the day, it's best for the GM to ask the player, what is the end result? What is the final thing that you want to have done? So that's what we had. We had that conversation. And the conversation was, do you want it to be where he doesn't have his big gun, in which case he's not going to have that major attack? Or did you want him to be just generally screwed up so that he has less dice to defend himself with, so that, you've pantsed him, he's all discombobulated? Which of those two things made more sense for what you ultimately wanted to have happen? And so we were able to resolve that on, I like the idea of getting rid of his gun. So, you did the pants at that point. The pantsing thing was just a narrative, right? It didn't actually cause him any additional dice problems. It was just funny. But the actual game effect of the action was throwing the gun off the thing. But no, that's not going to be purely narrative, because that gun was important to his power set, right? I mean, Len?
I think that's exactly correct. I would, just to sort of phrase it more concretely for anyone who maybe didn't see that game but is interested in the mechanics of how P&PUE works. If you're going to take a gun from somebody, basically there's two ways you can think about doing this, for at least according to the rules. First way is you're straight up grabbing something from somebody and you want to take it and chuck it away or use it yourself. That's a straight up mechanical, something called a grab, and there's rules for that. Okay, yep. It's basically I roll against you, and if I beat your roll by a little bit, we're fighting over it, and if I beat your roll by a little bit more, I've now taken it away. That's a straight up grab. It's in the rules. The other way is if conceptually you're trying to take away from the gun, is sort of what you're describing, but what you really want to do is just mess your opponent up for a little while. Maybe you want to give your opponent a penalty on their next, for a round, or maybe you want to cause your opponent to lose their next action or lose their next attack. Exactly what you do to make them lose that next round or next attack, that's narrative fluff. It's up to you to describe. Whether it's you pants them, or you distract him, or you trip them, or you knock him down, or you knock him back into a wall. That's the narrative fluff. The mechanical thing that you're doing is I want my opponent to lose their next attack. And that's where the strategic attack rules come in. Where, so in other words, you could be specifically doing something very concrete that you want to do, which is I want to grab this gun, okay? Or you could be specifically wanting to have an effect rather than a specific thing. And the effect, for example, is I want them to lose their next round to act. Great. What you're doing to make that happen, yeah, that's fluff that you decide. So that's the difference between doing a grab, specific, and doing a strategic attack, which is kind of an effect. How you do that effect, yeah, make it up.
Brett was just posting in the chat about embellishments. Embellishment is a very specific thing in the narrative play of Prowlers and Paragons. What Len's talking about is anybody can do that. If you succeeded in action, you get to describe the scene. That's just a cool thing that happens. And as he said, part of that is, here's the ways I caused this to happen. Embellishment specifically refers to you tried to do something and it didn't work, but you got really close to succeeding. So the GM is going to be describing, in most cases, what happened, or what didn't happen and how it did not happen. But if you got really close, the embellishment would be your chance to go, but I'm going to throw a little spin on it to make it so I still got to look cool. I still got something out of the process. So in the case of Alabama Slammer attacking Phalanx, had Alabama Slammer tried that strategic attack and it had not worked, but she had gotten within 0 or only -1 on the attempt, I would describe Phalanx, gets out of the way. You don't actually quite, pull his pants all the way down. You don't knock his gun out of his hand, but then she could embellish, say, yes, but I have his belt. Right. So that would be a cool thing. It's like, doesn't really have a massive effect, but then she's described this cool embellishment of, I got his belt, and he's looking going, oh crap, so, and it's just a story point, but it's a story point that maybe could be played with after that. So his was complete narration, then correct. Yes. So the next question from Brett Smith is what?
Sean, sorry, yes. Before you hit the next question. So Sean, you tried to pickpocket that guy.
Yes. You
got 2 successes. That means you get to narrate what happens and I get to embellish. Go ahead. Give me your narration about your attempted pickpocket.
We were in the crowd. He's currently being distracted by Mr. Schmiracle, who's doing a magic act on the stage. So Moonshadow in his FBI, secret disguise, whatever, goes by and just kind of slides in, and he manages to yank exactly what he was looking for, which was that folder out of that guy's briefcase.
Okay, so you do that successfully, Sean, but I'm going to embellish it as follows. So you've got the folder, but the fact is that you were moving, and everyone else's eyes was on the magician. the person on stage noticed you. So you got the folder. Unfortunately, the person on stage sort of, because they noticed you, they said, you there, come on upstage. I need an assistant. Come on stage. So now everyone's looking at you, and they want you to come on stage. Mind you, the person you pickpocketed, now, I think that's an okay embellishment. If I had said, the magician notices you, and therefore the person you pickpocketed turns around and says, hey, what are you doing? Would that be an okay embellishment?
No, because
why not?
You'd be negging my action. You'd be
neg your action completely, right? So my embellishment can't neg your action. It's got to just kind of add an interesting little twist to it.
So at that point, I'd have to describe that I'm tucking the folder inside my jacket and trying to hide it so nobody realizes, and then I try to get myself out of being up on stage, but then the story goes on from there.
And the story goes from there.
All right, Brett Smith asks, what do you suggest to use the gritty side when they hit 0 health, they die? So there are, in fact, specific gritty rules. I don't know how many of them. I don't remember how many of them are in the Quickstart. But Len, that's all you, man.
There are none in the Quickstart by design.
Okay.
So in terms, so are you suggesting which of the gritty rules do I suggest you use?
Well, just go ahead.
Or are you asking how they work?
Let's just cover the basics of gritty rules and how gritty rules apply to P&PUE on a broad scale.
Gotcha. So generally speaking, the gritty rules are there because at the end of the day, they just, the difference between Golden Age heroes versus Watchmen versus something like The Boys is going to depend on how realistic. Even comparing something like the comic books to the movie, to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and comparing that to like the Arrowverse, for example, I think there's different grittiness that comes into play, different levels of reality. And so rather than impose one, what we did was intentionally make it 4-color, which is kind of my default. That's about my mindset. I'm about at an 8-year-old level. That's where I'm comfortable. But for those who want something more complex and more mature, we've got those gritty rules there. All right, so what are the gritty rules? Well, generally they talk about damage, about if you get to a certain point, unlike the normal game where you can't really die, you're just knocked out. In the gritty rules, damage can kill you. And if you use all the gritty rules, damage can really kill you quick. But in addition to sort of the damage and death rules, the gritty rules also include rules for just some real life complications that aren't often really relevant in comic books, but if you want the game to be a bit more realistic, are definitely relevant. Things like penalties to your active defenses if you have to defend against multiple attacks on the same page. Things like the disadvantage you're at if someone has you, has a gun pointed at you while your weapon is still in its holster. Basically, if someone has to drop on you, the disadvantage that you're at to edge. And then rules along the lines of like the penalties incurred for, firing into a melee where you're trying not to hit somebody, that kind of thing. So they're just rules to make
right. He's asking about killing people. So the specific rules on that one are that instead of you getting incapacitated, we don't worry about death unless it's dramatically appropriate. In this one, isn't it? I can't remember. Is it negative health or is it? I think it was like negative health. Or if you really, really, really want to be horribly gritty, it's 0.
Yeah, it's basically in terms of killing people, it works like this. When you're doing a subdual attack, it's if you hit negative health. Well, in fact, for all damage, if you hit your negative health, you're dead. So that means if you have 6 health, if you get down to -6, that's it. The time to, you're on Boot Hill. The difference between subdual damage and lethal damage is that if you're knocked to 0 or less with lethal damage, you continue taking 1 point per page until somebody basically stabilizes you.
Because you're bleeding out.
If you're unconsciousness by fist, you're unconscious. If you're unconscious by sword through the gut, someone's going to need to do something, or you will soon be, shuffling off this mortal coil.
Yeah, but again, I'm glad he covered the rest of it because, the dials can be turned so that you can have a much street style grittier game. It's all built into that. Next question comes in from Mark Morgan. asking about the difference between elemental control and omnipower, since EC seems to be a narrow omnipower. Yeah, it's
we literally could have just had omnipower, and I thought about doing something like that, but at the end of the day, Sean and I both feel the same way, which is we want to have some generic powers and some specific powers, because I don't like making you build your way through hoops. Sometimes you want to buy a Lego, and sometimes you just want to buy the toy plane. So,
yes.
But at the end of the day, elemental control is really just a specific, narrow version of omnipower. And in fact, the rules work identically in the when you actually read the powers. Elemental control basically stands there with a sign pointing towards omnipower.
Yeah, it really is just so that if I want weather control, or I want lightning control, or I want water control, it's just easier for them to wrap their head around. Oh, I just grabbed that and I define it as that. So it's just a nice grab and go. It's we've had this conversation before about some games are buffet style and some games are Lego style, and we wanted both. We decided to be the one game that did both, where, for the person who wants to, customize a power set with a combination of different things, they can engineer and architect that all day long and it's fine. But we also gave people the grab and go option. So omnipower is going to be intimidating for a brand new player. They're going to look at omnipower. It has to be. For the purpose of this is a power I can do anything. We had to write it up so that the engineer and the architect can go, so if I do this, this, and this, I can build an omnipower that lets me do this sort of thing because I'm a sorcerer or a gadgeteer or whatever. But the new player can look at elemental control and go, I just control lightning and I control weather, and I can just do whatever I can think of out of that and go kaboom. And so they're getting to use the same exact mechanics, but it's less intimidating to them. But it works the exact same way. Role that really matters is that the GM understands the essence of, if I'm only doing one thing out of the pool, I call it a pool power. So I actually call that in the book, but I call them pool powers. And ECs, constructs, and omnipowers are like three great examples of what I call pool powers, which is I can do lots of different things out of the pool of points that that thing represents. And I can do one thing at full, or if I'm going to do a couple of things, I lose a die. If I'm doing three things, I lose a couple of dice. But it's really, really easy, and the player just doesn't have to worry that hard about it to make it happen. It's just a matter of elemental control is an easier way to wrap your head around. I manipulate water versus omnipower, which is I can take any concept and go nuts.
Yeah. So elemental control is us doing the homework of establishing the conceptual framework of what the power is about for you.
Right. Next question coming up is Harry Bell is asking us, thank you very much for looking for the new book. Are there mechanics for creating sidekicks in the new Ultimate Edition? Are there? Go for it, man. That's yours. I'll let you.
Yes, there are. It's a perk which gives you points that you can use to create a sidekick and or pet. So and you can buy the perk multiple times to have multiple ones. So yes, there absolutely are, and there's rules for how sidekicks advance. I can't help but hear the Teen Titans Go music in my head right now as we're talking about sidekicks. But anyway, but yeah, so there's rules for creation, there's rules for their advancement. I think that's all.
Yeah, I mean it's straight up. It's right out of the book. It's baked in there. It's another one of those buffet choices. Len spent a lot of time thinking about what are the kinds of things that when people they've read DC Comics, they've read Marvel Comics, they've watched the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, they've seen some of the DC movies, they've seen some of the DC animation, whatever. All the major sources for current comic book and superhero nerds, look at that. So, we look at each character and, how would we do that? How would we do that? How would we do that? And in some cases, well, that's just blast, and people understand blast. They just say it's blast, but it's fire, or they just say it's blast and it's silver bullets or whatever. But in other cases, you're like, we need an a la carte choice for that. We need something that goes, and sidekick was one of them, right? Sidekick or pet was exactly that. It's like, I want a sidekick or pet. Boom, sidekick or pet. Build another character. There you go. Off you go. And okay. So I'm going to go and jump on that one. Kevin Mans is talking about the fastball special. That's called a clobbering attack. No. I'm sorry. I'm wrong. That's the teamwork attack. That is the teamwork attack, which I'm very, 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 very proud of. that we put that in. Teamwork
Oh,
attack.
you're right. That's teamwork, not clobbering. Good call.
Yeah, teamwork attack is exactly that. It is you waiting till the end of the page to team up with one or more other members of the group to pile it on to one main target or bad guy. And that could be described as Colossal picking up Rumblebee in the Modern Gods and throwing, or some really big, tall steel guy throwing some spiky, hand, regenerating guy at the main bad guy or whatever. Or it can be everyone at the end of, or near the end of the Ultron version, the Ultron movie. God, I can't remember the name of it now. With the Avengers when they were against Ultron and they were all blasting away with energy at the Ultron body. That's a teamwork attack. So it's just a matter of everybody waits to the end. They team up. They get up a couple of dice. Their sixes can potentially explode. And so it's any number of ways you want to describe that. It's baked right into the rules. Okay, we had other questions. Let me kick back over. Would Omnipower be what is used to make Tony Stark an inventor-type character? I say no. Len, what do you say?
No. Well, I say I can't answer the question because I don't really know what's being asked. In other words, you can use Omnipower to create a guy or a gal who can whip something up in an instant, and what they whip up happens to be a technological device.
Mindset.
I'm hearing we're getting feedback.
Sorry. I fixed it.
Cool, no worries. So you could totally do that if you're like a gadgeteer person who creates things on the fly. Like the character called Box, I think, from Alpha Flight for a while. But if you're thinking about somebody who tinkers in their lab and builds their own stuff, well, that's just an excuse for where the powers came from, but those powers would be separate powers with the item con. And I'd probably give myself a high technology rank to kind of explain, because it makes sense within the fiction.
Now, there's also the thing that with a high technology score, you can use the gadgets rules.
Yes.
You can do the inventing, basically, that you're talking about, and these would be one-off things that only really last for a scene or for a session. So, yes, having a high technology score would let you invent stuff. Having a high science score would let you, read Richard science something up. Having a high expertise in occult would let you do the Doctor Strange ritual to come up with this thing to hand over and say, use this to defeat the demon Argazad because I can't be there. So all of that is right there based on actually having really good talents and having some time to put something together. So that's how I would do it. Tony Stark would have a ridiculously high technology score, and between scenes or in a non-combat scene, he'd be in his lab, maybe with Bruce Banner helping him out, and they'd be tinkering and inventing stuff up. Okay, next question. We're back to Sean Beatty asking if I had an EC or Omnipower of 12D and wanted to use 3 powers in the same turn, that would result in 3 times 10D, like a force field growth and flight, for example, unless it was an active power. Okay, Len, do you see that?
Okay, I see that. So first off, what I want to say is this is solid question. Is why I highly recommend that people stay away from Omnipower when you first play the game. Get a little bit comfortable with the game first before you start literally digging into the most complex, inherent by its very nature, the most complex power in the game. And I don't mean it's complicated to use. I mean, it just requires thinking about the game a little bit, and it'll slow actual gameplay down until you're more comfortable with the rules. Okay, it's not that it's complicated. It's just that because it lets you imitate any other power, it's easier if you know the powers. So anyway, that's my first suggestion. So now let's just talk about Omnipower generally. Omnipower, if you use it a second time in the same page, you're at -1 die. If you use it a third time in the same page, you're at -2 die, etc. It's a cumulative -1 penalty per subsequent use in the same page. Okay, so I have a 12 die Omnipower. Someone attacks me. I have Omnipower force field. Bap, 12 dice. Now I'm going to turn around and I'm going to shoot somebody with an Omnipower energy blast. That's now 11 dice. because I already used my Omni Power once. So that's now 11 dice. And then somebody else flies away, and for movement, I want to fly after them, so I use my Omni Power to fly. That flight is now 10 dice, okay? If I've been flying throughout this whole time, then we know I've got one sort of ongoing use of Omni Power cooking through the whole page. So the armor would have been -1 die, so the armor would have been at 11 dice. And the blast would be at -2 die, so the blast would be at 10 dice. Again, so every subsequent use is at -1 die. Is there any are there any complications there? Yeah, the real big complication is if you're going to imitate a power that's expensive and therefore more powerful. If a power costs, let's say, 2 hero points per rank,
Telekinesis
counts as 2 powers. Telekinesis is a great example because telekinesis can do so many different things. So if you're imitating telekinesis, for example, that would count as 2 powers. So even the very first time you use it, if I have 12 dice and I'm going to imitate telekinesis, right off the bat, I'm rolling at 11 dice because telekinesis costs 2 points per rank, so that effectively counts as 2 powers. Okay? Super speed costs, I think, 4 points per rank, if I'm not mistaken.
3.
Only 3? Okay. So let's say super speed costs 3 points per rank. If I use Omni Power to imitate super speed, and boy, you would have to have set that one up ahead of time so it makes sense if I were the GM. But anyway, if you did and you use Omni Power, imitate super speed, let's say Omni Power time control, that kind of makes sense. Right off the bat, if you have 12 die Omni Power, you're operating as if you have a 10 die super speed. Again, because it
counts as though it were 3 powers.
It counts as if you're using 3 powers. Again, that's not too I don't think it's too complicated. But if you've got to look up every power to figure out how much it costs ahead of time or whatever, once you play the game for a while, it's pretty straightforward. But if it's the first time you're sitting down, I think you're crazy to do it. Plus, once you play the game a little bit, you're aware of some of the limitations that Omni Power has. At first, it sounds like the all-powerful uber everything ability. But then you realize telekinesis, for example, great example. I'd strongly recommend actually buying telekinesis. So that way you get your full telekinesis and you get it for you have telekinesis at 12 dice, you're blasting at 12 dice, you're using it at 12 dice, you're using it defensively at 12 dice. It doesn't go down per use. That's a strong inherent limitation to Omni Power that I don't think people think about until they find out in play that that's how it works. It's a grab bag. It's a utility. It's a big, powerful utility power. But I wouldn't rely on that power exclusively because of that continual degradation of the rank. So again, that's the stuff that I would recommend, and it's there in the game, but I'll tell you all now that are watching, play with the game a little bit first before you play with Omni Power too much.
So I was watching over on the Facebook because there's people still popping questions over there, and I'm trying not to ignore them. I wanted to clarify something. Believe it or not, as much as I played this game, I just want to make sure you and I are on the same page with this one because I've been treating it this way. Say he had growth going. That was the first power. He walks into the thing with growth at 12 dice. If he then decides to fly and blast, does the growth go down by 2 dice?
The honest answer that I would give is probably no, unless I can do it easily. Because if the growth is the first thing he's doing, the first thing you're doing is at 12 dice. Right? So in other words, if you fire an energy blast at 12 dice, right? And then the second thing you do is armor is 11 dice. Do you have to roll 1 die off of the blast you just did? No. It's a done deal. So
but then if you had the armor going, you would then be down on your blast though.
Right. So the long and short is that I guess the way to say it might be this. It would depend on when that growth comes into play. So if you've got growth at 12, and that might be the best way to answer it. If you've got growth at 12 dice, right, and the first thing you do is you punch something and you're giant and you roll your 12 dice to hit or whatever, it is what it is. It's at 12 dice, right? Now let's say at the end of the round, you need to pick something up. Your growth has come into play twice, either to attack or defend or move or something else. Now so it kind of depends on sort of where it comes into play. Don't overthink where it is. Just think about the concept. The first time you use it, the second time you use it, the third time you use it. Explain it away however you want, but don't break your brain trying to figure out the nuances. Just first use, second use, third use.
Dice keep going down.
And just keep going down. Yeah.
Until the page is done and you move on to the next page.
Yep.
Next question by Harry Bell. Is there any particular power, ability, perk, whatever you want to call it, that you guys haven't been able to replicate in the new Ultimate Edition?
No.
The answer is absolutely not. We have beat this thing to hell for 5 years. The few things we came across that we were like, oh, wait a minute, we don't know how to do this quite, or we could, but it'd be really complicated. Well, then we put it in. Usually I would go, Len, this thing doesn't work exactly the right way for the way people are expecting. And then let me go, all right, damn it, they don't. And then he would come back a couple of days. I go, here, it's better now. Or here's a new thing that does that so that I don't have to break the other thing and make it, bend over backwards to be this thing. So one way or another, we skinned every cat there was. And I have yet. In all the times I've done these videos, the only character that threw me wasn't because I couldn't figure out mechanically, it was because I couldn't remember what the hell he could do. And that was Mort from Orc. But each time somebody's come up with like, so he could do this, he could do this, he could do this. It was either like, okay, it's just because he was weird. That's not a power. Or like, we finally the other day, actually was, we were having a meal yesterday and I finally said, he probably has like 3 or 4 dice, omni power, weird alien crap. If you really want to go all in to make him a superhero-ish kind of sort of character, for maybe maximum 5 dice of weird alien crap and then move on with your life. But that was the hardest thing anybody's ever come up with, and nothing else has come up that I haven't been able to do. Len,
the only one that's not there, and that's by choice, and just to let you know, it was actually in there for a little bit. You don't have any giant reality bending powers. I mean, you have omni power, which can kind of do anything, but under a very limited but you don't have the beyonder power. You don't have powers that inherently you could codify them, but it's a huge waste of time because those powers are really narrative triggers and backdrops for the game. So, there isn't any powers that would scale in such a way that you could take all of Earth and turn it into a world of medieval fantasy and transform every person into a monster, sort of pull a Shadowrun goblinization. And there's no power that I could think of that would really do that, certainly not for any extended period of time on a global scale. And there probably shouldn't be. There's a certain level of codification that is just not necessary. Not even beyond not necessary. That is actually a hindrance. I think our scale is pretty big, but we're still working within a scale. Anything that goes beyond that scale, anything that goes to the beyonder, for example,
it's flat
is a waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to roll dice, you're going to roll dice, and then it's going to be game playable. So anything that could be reasonably game playable, right?
Right.
One of my test characters for these situations has always been Rogue, right? The full, the top end Rogue that you most people talk about, who she's super strong, she's super fast, she can fly, she's super resilient, and she can reach out, touch somebody, mimic their powers and knock them unconscious. Boom, no problem in this game. Done, easy done. So
Rogue's powers have changed so much depending on when she showed up. I think she first showed up in an Avengers Annual as a villain. It's a great drawing of, you see Captain America being thrown through a brick wall, and it's Rogue who's thrown him through a brick wall. It's an awesome drawing. Anyway, I think that's the first time Rogue appeared. And back then, she was this monster who was just draining. She was like the DC android Amazo. She was just draining everybody's powers and kept it because that's what she needed to do as a villain. Once she became a player character, once she became a hero, that's changed a little bit. She gets them for a little bit, but then, again, you got to allow that little nuance too between hero and villain. And we always have to allow some nuance between story. Every character is a narrative element in a story as opposed to a mechanical element in a game. There's always going to be some difference there.
Yep. There's no more questions in the queue. So I'm going over to Facebook to see what they are asking over there that I haven't managed to answer already.
Wait a minute. Somebody gave me a damn you, Len. I'm very excited if I was able to get it. I got to figure out what I said.
So Batman's utility belt. But Batman's utility belt is a manifestation of preparation. The preparation power is the I have what I need because I gave you a resolve to say I have what I need. And the utility belt is just a manifestation of that. Now, there's some typical stuff that is in Batman's utility belt. So if I were building it, I would preset that he's got certain gadgets that he always has. And those would all have the item con because they're in his utility belt. But then everything else that you could think of, you don't have to think of because he's only going to need shark repellent spray in a very rare storyline. So he's going to just spend the resolve to say preparation. I knew we were going to be fighting sharks today because we were, once again, Aquaman's become a villain again. So we had to go beat up all of his stupid, ultra warrior sharks. So I have this cool sonic thing that's going to cause all the sharks to go swimming away because I'm prepared and I'm Batman and I had it in my belt. So So I said this before. I'll say this again. I refuse to watch even one single episode of Go Teen Titans Go in order to be able to do anything from that. So if you want to say, that you stumped me because I can't do the Go Teen Titans or Teen Titans Go version of those characters, then you stumped me. I can do Teen Titans all day long, but if there's something that they do, then Teen Titans, that stupid damn cartoon that's different from their normal manifestation, then fine, you can say you stumped me because I won't do those. I hate them. Blech. That's not my Teen Titans.
Have you ever watched them?
I saw bits and pieces and moments, and I can't stand it. I just cannot.
If you had kids, you would love that cartoon, I promise you.
But that's not the Teen Titans. I grew up with them fighting Trigon for crying out loud. I grew up with the drama and the powerful stories of those characters, and that's not my Teen Titans, man. It just can't be. Yes, Harry Bell has it right. Wolfman Perez, New Teen Titans. Yes.
I have all those issues. Yes, I grew up with them too. Trust me, I know.
So, again, one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because how many people had been talking about the whole cause and effect thing, and I want to encourage any of you who are super backers who are going to be running this game. This is the most important piece of information that I can give you, and when you wrap your head around this, it will make this game such a joy to run because you will constantly get to say yes. You will constantly get to say, that's cool, you get to try to do that. Because all you have to do is when the player starts asking this really weird, elaborate question of, so are they standing near that? Is this a thing? Is this a thing? You can just stop them and go, what are you trying to do? What is the end result of the action you want to take? If you are successful at this action, what happens? Take them to that stage, get them to describe that, and then you can reverse engineer it just like that. It just comes down to, that's going to be super speed against his agility because you're trying to shove a red rubber ball into his mouth and then wrap duct tape around his mouth so that Rumpelstiltskin can't keep casting spells anymore. This is an example I keep bringing out over and over and over again because it happened in the first Unconventionals game in MarsCon earlier this year, and it was brilliant. The freaking Super Speedster, Super Speed ran to a hardware store nearby, Super Speed ran to a toy store nearby, ran back, and basically it was just, in the end he said he just wanted to take advantage of the fact that it looked like Rumpelstiltskin had to be able to speak to do his powers. So he said, I'm going to shove this red rubber ball in, and I'm going to super speed an entire roll of duct tape to shut him down. So I called it effectively a strategic attack with the specific result, because strategic attacks do allow you to declare a specific result, and if the GM agrees, then that's what happens. And the specific result was to shut him down for X period of time, and he shut him down for 3 pages worth of effect. And he could fight, he could pick up a stick and hit people. He wasn't completely neutralized, but his most powerful thing was shut down because it was a brilliant use of super speed. It was a great idea. And at the end of the day, that's what he told me what to do. I just want to shut him down. So they had a really creative way of how to do it. That every single time, this game will let you say yes, and they will let you resolve it in a satisfying way, as opposed to being an I win button. That's the other thing, because a lot of GMs are concerned about, well, if I let them do this, it becomes an I win button. It's too powerful an effect. No, strategic attack is a beautiful way to fairly adjudicate any one of those actions, because it says it will last for X period of time. It will last for a certain amount of time, and at which point you can say he clawed the duct tape off his face, or he crawls back up the mountain after you knock him. Whatever it is that was the effect was, it lasts for a certain amount of time, and it's fairly adjudicated. You got to say yes, but it didn't break the game. This game is better at that than anything else I've ever run. Straight up.
And for what it's worth, I mean, this is about P&PUE, but let me just say that for all for anyone who doesn't do this, asking the question, all right, dude, what are you trying to do? You should kind of ask that in any game. If you're running a game and the player starts asking you questions like, well, are there barrels in the room that have metal around them? All right, what are you trying to do? What are you at? Just where are you going with these questions? You want to ask that in any game, because at the end of the day, generally as a GM, you want to be able to give the player what they want, as long as it's not wacky, absurd, or game destroying. So rather than players who are used to more adversarial relationships with their game masters will sort of chess match you as they slowly move their pawns into position to then say, well, you said this, checkmate. So, as gemming in general, like, all right, hold on there, cowboy. What are you going for? What is it you're that's useful in every game, I think. So, but certainly here as well. And that philosophy is baked into the rules.
P&PUE was designed to service that style. Absolutely, from the beginning. Len is going to get embarrassed here because he has taught me so much about game mastering and being a better game master as well as a better game designer. As I've talked about how I've really started to delve into his work and see what he's done. It has just been such a thrill to play with this stuff. And it's flat out the favorite game that I've run with everybody I've run it for, because it gives me the joy of being who I am, which is I want to create a story space. And I'm going to put pieces into that story space that represent my storytelling, but it's also going to be a place where you're picking up those pieces and you're putting your own pieces in, and you're going to come at me, and it's going to be interesting and fun and challenging, but it's not adversarial, it's shared. And this game screams to that. Now, just to be fair, also, the TNT system is very much designed around that. The Fury games are also oriented at that. They have a completely different feel. They operate functionally very differently and scratch very, very different itches, but all of Len's games are firmly entrenched in the thought of, we came together to sit at a table. We wanted a crunchy, fun experience. We didn't just want to sit here and just tell stories at each other. We actually wanted to roll dice and have a cool mechanic to play with that was satisfying, but we still wanted to be a very narrative, shared storytelling thing. And I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the indie game design, because I'm old school enough. I still want that crunch of dice. I still want to pick up dice and throw them at the situation as a GM or as a player. I get to do that and still feel like I am playing 21st century games because of these designs.
Thank you. I think at the end of the day, I'm a fan of the narrative games, but like Sean, I was raised on the fun of rolling dice and rolling to see what happens, and sometimes it's not always what you want, or even sometimes it's not what would make a good narrative. Sometimes the dice betray you. And I saw somebody, I don't remember who, or I think I remember who, but I don't want to call them out, saying on a YouTube video or something, everyone remembers the stories. No one ever remembers who rolled what when. That's not true. We do remember the stories for sure, and the crazy stuff people did, like the ball gag. I remember many crazy things I've done with a ball gag, but that's not for now. We'll go in a different direction. Yeah. But anyway, what I was saying is sometimes you also just remember an absurd roll, either a terrible roll that just everything went south, or a fantastic roll that changed the course of the sort of what people occasionally do remember, when the table explodes when somebody rolls a 20 to hit and rolls a 20 to confirm the critical, or whatever the case, or when somebody rolls, as a friend of mine at my home table does regularly, an insane, obscene number of sixes when is absolutely necessary, and takes down a major villain that nobody expected to go down. Sometimes the roles are memorable too. So I like both. And so I'm glad Sean likes them, and for you guys have played it, and if you enjoyed it, I'm glad you do as well. So
somebody was asking about the mask. I totally cheated and did Google and found out what the mask's powers and abilities are supposed to be because I never saw the movie. So he would straight up have, while wearing the mask, he'd have super strength, he'd have speed, and his intellect would be raised, boosted stats basically. Apparently, the ability to warp reality means it would have to be an omni power as well. So there, I was not stumped. I just had to Google first. There, that was over on Facebook, but just freaking Michael Walsh trying his best to stump us. All right, we got 10 minutes left. Well, 9 minutes actually. So there's another question in the queue. Let me go check that out. This is from the comment section. Speedsters are notoriously hard to build in a lot of games. How is it in P&P? Oh, that's one power, baby. One freaking power. And it does all the speedster stuff. Look at Alabama Slammer in the Quickstart. Straight up. I mean, she's got some other good abilities. You can make some arguments for, a good speedster is going to probably, have at least a low level, suit of body armor just so they don't get road rash when they fall over. Maybe some good super senses just to resent that they're, able to see ahead or whatever. I mean, there's a couple other things you can stick on to a super speedster, but I mean, players have almost a tendency to accidentally get bored with the super speedster because they're like, oh, I just roll super speed for that. I just roll super speed for that. I just roll super speed for that. What they have to realize is, yes, they're rolling super speed for almost everything they do. So it's a matter of then it's really about how creative they get into the description of what they're doing with their super speed, because that super speed power does. This is one of those buffet powers. It's expensive as hell because it does the things you expect super speed to do. We don't ask you to go, I have to buy this level of running and this level of agility and this level of rapid actions and then this level of area effect attacks because I want to be able to take a bunch of minions out or whatever. All of that is off the table. You don't have to worry about paying for all that. Or I want to buy a special power that lets me like instant change my clothes. Duh, you just can because you are that fast. Those kinds of things are baked right into the thing, which again is why it costs 3 points per. But it does all of those things. But the only thing that I've seen done with a speedster that makes it, can make a speedster even more disgusting is to buy super speed with the area effect, because, then they can actually go hit multiple groups of minions and not suffer any die loss when they go hit them all. And that's kind of horrific. So GMs be aware that's an ugly cheat, but it is one that does work. So super speed is awesome and easy to build. One of the easiest character concepts to build.
The only thing that super speed doesn't have built into it is the ability to build up lightning and shoot it. And the only other thing that it doesn't have that some super speedsters can do is vibrating through stuff. So if you want phasing, that would be a separate power. You want to shoot lightning, that would be a separate power. If you want to go into some alternate dimension where moving quickly is a thing, that's a different power. But generally speaking, the ability to move fast and the advantages that brings onto the table are one power, super speed. I want to move over to something Mark asked a question about: how well do street level heroes work side by side with superheroes like Hawkeye and Thor for comparison? Yep. They don't work well at all. The game completely falls apart when you put those guys together. So no, hopefully that's not the case. I'm totally joking. Hopefully that's not the case. So long and short is that there's a resource. The core resource in the game is called Resolve. That's like plot points or here. Some of you guys have heard this already, so just indulge me for if there's some folks on who haven't. The core resource in the game is called Resolve. Those are like plot points or bennies or inspiration in 5th edition. They're basically points that you spend to roll extra dice or re-roll bad rolls or create lucky breaks for yourself, etc. That resource is called Resolve. And whatever in any game that you play, there's a trait cap. That trait cap is the highest rank you can have in a trait. Let's assume that any game that, say, Thor is in, Thor is right at the trait cap. Okay, he's right there. You can't get any higher than Thor in a game that Thor is playing in, let's assume. At least not as a hero, as a player character. All right. So in a game where Thor is at the trait cap, he's going to start off with 0 resolve. He's actually, if he wants to have some resolve, and he probably will, he's going to have to spend some of his character creation points, which are called hero points. He's going to have to spend some of those to start off with even just 1 point or 2 points of resolve. Now, on the other hand, Hawkeye, for example, his highest stat, even if you take his attacks into account and stuff like that, isn't going to be nearly as high. Let's say it's 5 or even 6 points lower than Thor's. Hawkeye will start off with 2 points of resolve for every point below the trait cap. So if Thor's at the trait cap and Hawkeye starts off with his highest ability is like 6 points below the trait cap, Hawkeye starts off with 12 points of resolve. We've tested this a couple of times, including Sean and I have actually tested it together in one of Sean's game that Sean ran. I played, humorously enough, my archer guy, Parthian, and it works very well. The resolve does not make you as powerful as the super powerful person. No matter how much resolve I have, I can't punch through a bank vault, but you have a lot of utility, you have a lot of options, and if you were to go toe-to-toe, you'd probably still lose if you were the person with a lot of resolve, but maybe not.
You can either give them a hell of a fight, or you can use that resolve to pull off something they just were not expecting.
Yeah, and you have a lot more utility. So long and short is you have a lot more of these pool of points, plot points, resolve points, bennies, whatever you want to call them, when you're lower level, and that's the balance.
So here's a really good one. Would Lightning Punch be an instance of using a point resolve to do a power stunt? Absolutely. So if you did not want to always be doing the lightning thing, but every once in a while you were like, I want to try to pull that off, or for the first time that you wanted to pull that off, you would spend a resolve to power stunt super speed to describe how you're going to do a lightning blast or whatever at the same die level, if it makes sense, which in that case, because you're obviously using a trope that we've all seen and it does make sense, if you had 12 die super speed, you spend a resolve to do on that one page only, that one time, 12 dice energy blast or 12 dice energy punch if you really wanted to, but blast really be the reason to do it because super speed is going to let you hit the same dice level anyway. But to do the blast at 12 dice, that would be a one-off expenditure of the resolve. And then if you decide, you know what, I really like being able to do that all the time, then when the GM gets around to handing you out some hero points as experience, you buy the power. Now, what happens if they try to do something that doesn't quite make sense for they're stunting, but it's like a really weird, bizarre stunt, Len?
I think they end up at a penalty. They're at, in other words, instead of doing it at their base level, I think they end up doing it at the level minus. I don't have it in front of me right now, unfortunately, and that particular computer is a different computer. It's locked up at the moment, so I've got to see what's going on with that. So, but if
it's kind of a stretch, the imitated power rank equals half that of the ability or power being used. So if you're trying to like blast flight and you don't normally fly, and you have 12 dice energy blast and you want to use it to fly, you're probably only flying 6 dice at that point. But if you're trying to blast, take your fire blast and say, well, I really need to use cold here. So I'm going to turn my blast into, I'm going to like suck all of the heat out of the situation because I manipulate fire, but I'm going to, if you can science it enough and convince the GM that you can pull that off, great. If you can't science it enough, then you're only getting 6 dice cold blast instead of 12 dice, fire blast. It just comes down to a good negotiation between you and the GM and a good storytelling at that point. Unfortunately, my group is, full of scientists, so they're constantly sciencing everything at me. So I go, okay, fine, you get all the dice, shut up. I think we have, we're at 6:00. So we usually try to keep these things to about an hour. It's family time out there in Miami and dinner time for me over here. So we appreciate you guys very, very much. As I like to always do when we get to the end, let's run the numbers real quick, just to see where we are.
While Sean is running the numbers, let me just share. One, thank you for everybody who has pledged, whether you've pledged $1 and you're just a concerned citizen who's watching what's going on, or whether you've pledged more. We appreciate your attention. I appreciate all the kind words. This has been a labor of love for many, many, many years. And every letter and word on those pages is time that I have not spent with my family. So I really appreciate everyone who's paid any attention at all to it. And if you're on the fence and thinking about it, I hope you will give us a shot. And we're almost, I don't know where we are right now, but I know we're close. And like Sean always says, we're really relying on you guys to spread the word, because, you know, I'm one guy in Miami and Sean's one guy over in Colorado. We have a couple of other people working with us, but as you can see behind me, I spend most of my time in my Magic Citadel, so I don't have lots of time, to do much more than that. So whatever assistance you guys could give us in terms of getting the word out, and helping us out and helping to share the fun of this, we would definitely appreciate it. But first and foremost, just thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So the numbers are, as of this moment, well, shit, it just, pardon my French, but it just moved literally as I was talking to you. It just moved again. It just went up slightly. So that's really cool. Somebody else just pledged. What I was saying is it's all right, cool. So we are at 25,562 with 358 backers right now. That's really impressive. Like, the number of backers we have is fantastic. And the volume during this, what was normally a really low period, we've actually had a pretty good pledge volume per day. Our average has stayed up pretty nicely. We are at 91% funded. 91% funded. So we are in really, really good shape there. We've got way less than $2,500 to go. Now, as I said all along, I'm greedy, guys. I want to get to the stretch goals. I would really, really like us to get to the stretch goals, but I'm going to be happy just to get the 2 books out, and then if it comes down to it, we'll move the ball forward on a second Kickstarter to get some of the other setting books done. But as it is when we hit that 28K, we will have unlocked Prowlers Paragons Ultimate Edition. We will have unlocked Pinnacle Cities Most Wanted. We will have unlocked Crisis Control, which is a Modern Gods adventure that I'm co-developing with Corey Williamson and Jennifer Scheinfeld. And we will unlock a Pinnacle City adventure by Eddie Webb of White Wolf and Pugmire fame. So all 4 of those are unlocked already, and those things will happen when we get to that kick. So we're in good shape there. Just keep that ball moving, keep that needle moving for us. The big thing I'm saying right now is, if there's any place where you don't see us being talked about, if you don't see this game being talked about, by all means, talk about it. Grab the links and talk about it over there. And if you know people who are looking to interview folks for to talk about their Kickstarter, talk about the game, if you're looking for anybody who would love to have me come on and run a game for them, or have Len come on and do stuff, then we are shameless. We'll get out there. We want to talk to people about this stuff. So if you know anybody, send them our way. On that note, we're going to call it. Some of the team already said the phrase, but we'll say it together. As always, peace out, and the world
needs heroes.